Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I'm going to chat with you guys a little bit about hypertrophy, also known as winning them their hypertrophies, or Gainzzz with 3 Z's. Actually, it's more Z's if you want to get really big. But I don't talk about this as a pure topic very often because I really don't care. In other words, I see size as something that's a benefit to us for purposes of strength in different athletic endeavors. Or, I mean, I get it. Some people want to be big and jacked. I can understand that. But I don't talk about it generally outside of a strength context. And even in this case, I can talk about base building so that you can use it to develop it into strength if you wanted. But the thing is, anyone who is making a big deal out of hypertrophy programs, like the need to actually make them complex or sell them or even particularly periodize them, they're just trying to make a buck off of you. And I'm not saying maybe some fine tuning won't help you get those last percentage or two, but keeping in mind a percentage or two is very, very, very small. You're not going to notice a difference, like without equipment to measure it. That's how small of a difference you're talking about. Programming for hypertrophy, maximum hypertrophy. Maximum hypertrophy is actually pretty simple. Okay? Train each muscle group twice a week. Again, this is based upon real world observations and a fair amount of research. This is what most coaches will tell you who have coached a lot of people, particularly if they've worked with both drug-free and enhanced guys. You're going to find a lot of this stuff applies very well to both groups. Train each muscle twice a week. I would argue upper lower is probably ideal, but about twice a week. Again, we could argue about the ideal frequency, but we're talking about the general average. Most people, you're going to be near your optimal frequency there in the context of overall training volume. Why? Because maximum growth is generally obtained, and when I say maximum, I don't mean that maybe there aren't some studies that show if we go way beyond this in some circumstances you gain 0.5% more. But again, we're talking about some of the studies show you gain less, and that's a key point. Some of them show you gain less, some show a tiny fractional amount more. 10 to 20 sets per week per muscle group. Spread out over 2 workouts. Why? Generally, most studies show that when we exceed about 10 sets per muscle group in a single training session, we really have a lot of problems with diminished returns. Either no extra growth, in some cases, a less growth, depending upon the study and what it looked at. So in order to get to those higher training volumes, you're going to need to hit each muscle twice a week. Okay? And these are quality sets. So I'm not talking about sub-maximal sets for the most part. We're talking about limit sets, either to failure or very, very, very close to muscle failure. All right? Quality sets. Or we could argue compensatory acceleration, some of my speed work. You guys see me do. So what's that end up being? 5 to 10 sets per muscle group, twice a week. Now, what counts as a set? Well, sometimes if it's a smaller secondary muscle, it's not a full set on a big movement. In other words, bench press, we could argue that the front delts and the pecs take most of the work, and the triceps get a secondary stimulus. Right? They might need more. So a perfect example. You could do 5 sets of bench of some type, 5 sets of dips. All right, that's now 10 sets for your pecs and front delts. It's 5 sets for your triceps. We're in that range of 5 to 10. If you wanted more tricep growth, do 5 sets of tricep extensions of some type. You're done. Using that as an example. We could argue that rows and things may not stimulate maximum bicep size. They'll give you some. There's probably some wiggle room. So in other words, there's going to be a few muscles that you may need to, depending upon the nature of the big movements that you do, throw something else in. Okay, maybe your shoulder And tricep exercises don't hit enough chest, so you might need to throw some extra chest work in if you're chasing size. Because maybe you're doing a lot of overhead pressing or incline. Well, incline bench doesn't particularly work the chest that well. Ooh, that's not my opinion. That is biomechanics. I'm not saying it doesn't work it. The lower half of the chest gets very, very mild stimulation. Like, again, back over to half sets. So, I mean, if that's what you're doing, you're going to need some extra chest work. But the front delts get just hammered. So the point being, whether you count each exercise as a full set or a half set, 5 to 10 high quality sets per muscle group twice a week, taken to failure or within 1 rep of failure. If you're stopping 1 rep short of failure, though, you better push towards that higher volume end. If you're taking sets to actual real failure, again, failure being defined as momentarily being unable to complete the set. Doesn't mean you wait 5 seconds and grind out another and then have someone help you do forced reps. That's not what we're talking about. Okay. You do this through the whole body. What sort of rep ranges? Something in the 5 to 20. We generally know quality sets need to be at least 5 reps for maximum growth. We can argue about the merits of lower rep sets. I use them, but sort of not really. I use them for maxes these days because I do max effort work twice a week. I'm a strength athlete. I care about that a lot. It's my bread and butter. For those of you who are just trying to get big, okay, we could argue about the upper threshold fibers on the heavy singles. But again, we're getting back to that nuanced point of, is the growth potential significant there? Or is it just adding that extra 0.5%? So, mostly 5 to 10. Some muscles will do okay. Some muscles will do okay with up to 20. Depending upon the muscle. Particularly if you got a muscle that lags a lot more than others, you might need a little bit more rep range variation. Okay? Now, don't assume that just because you want a muscle bigger that it's lagging. There's a difference between a lagging muscle and a muscle that you think needs to grow. Is it big compared to the rest of your body? Okay, something that's lagging, legitimately lagging, you probably need a higher variation of rep ranges. A lot of big exercises don't do well with higher reps, and a lot of smaller exercises don't do well with low reps. So that 5 to 20 range, that's probably your sweet spot. Closer to 5 to 12, to be honest, for most movements. Again, a few muscle groups and certain exercises would lend themselves to more. So stick to mostly 5 to 12 reps. You can take some things up to 15 or 20, depending upon what you're trying to do. That breaks it down. People say, what about programming periodization? We could argue about that all day long, couldn't we? Now, I use the conjugate method, which is its own form of periodization. I don't think, quite frankly, that linear periodization is all that phenomenal for Gainzzz. In terms of meaning that you're going to see a significant difference from if you just stuck with relatively standard rep ranges or changed them up from time to time. Again, people who are not chasing anything super complex, who just want to get big and build a base, training like this is fine. You don't need to worry particularly about progressive overload, because if you're taking stuff to failure or limit sets, you're getting training stimulus. You could change the exercises. And I'm not saying you should, because muscle confusion doesn't actually work. I'm saying that it probably won't matter a lot as long as the sets are high quality. They're heavy enough to achieve the desired rep range and to reach fatigue. And they effectively work the muscles that you're hitting. Exercise selection isn't as critical purely from a hypertrophic perspective as it's been made out to be. You might personally find some exercises work a little better for a certain muscle for you than for your friend, mainly just due to your anatomy. But that's it. that basically sums up how easy it is to train just to get pretty big. Okay, if you're just chasing 90% of your potential, that will actually work. Supported by the research, supported by the real world evidence. It's simple. That's why we don't need to talk about it a lot. Not really a worthwhile subject. I summed it up in 10 minutes while still rambling. That's everything you need to know for that goal. Alright guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.